When the police finally walked through that front door, the lights were still on. Dinner was still sitting on the table. His phone was still charging on the counter. His wallet, his keys, his ID, all of it, right where he left it. But he was gone. And the last person he spoke to was the mother-in-law he got pregnant. If you think you know where this is going, you don't. This story takes place in Mountain Brook, Alabama, one of those quiet, well-kept suburbs where the lawns are perfectly trimmed and the neighbors wave from their driveways. The kind of neighborhood where nothing bad is supposed to happen. And on the surface, nothing bad was happening. At least, that's what it looked like. Daniel Reeves was 38 years old. Stable job, decent income. The kind of man people described as reliable. His wife, Emily, was 34. She worked as a school counselor. Calm, composed, someone who spent her days helping other people through their problems. Together, they had built what looked like a quiet, ordinary life. That two-story brick house on a tree-lined street. Morning coffee on the porch. Dinner together most nights. Normal. Comfortable. But about 18 months before everything fell apart, something changed. Emily's mother, Laura Mitchell, 56 years old, recently divorced, needed a place to stay. It was supposed to be temporary, just until she got back on her feet. So Laura moved into the guest room downstairs. And for a while, it was fine. Dinners together, quiet evenings watching television, a family adjusting. But here's the thing, there were small moments. Nothing dramatic, nothing anyone could point to directly. Just a look that lasted a second too long. A conversation that stopped the moment Emily walked into the room. A kind of comfort between Daniel and Laura that didn't quite fit the relationship they were supposed to have. Most people would have dismissed it. Emily almost did. But those small moments were the beginning of everything. 3 months after Laura moved in, she made an announcement. She was pregnant. The room went quiet. Emily didn't know what to say. Her mother was 56, divorced, living in her guest room, and pregnant. Laura said it was from a short relationship, someone she'd met briefly, a private matter. She didn't offer a name. She didn't offer details. She just said it was handled, and she changed the subject. Most people in that situation might have pushed harder, but Emily was blindsided, shocked enough to let it go. At least, for now. It was 2 weeks later that something stopped her cold. She wasn't looking for anything. She was just tidying up, sorting through some paperwork on the kitchen counter, and that's when she saw it. A printout, prenatal clinic paperwork, her mother's name at the top, and in the emergency contact field, Daniel Reeves. Not a sibling, not a friend. Her husband. Emily stood there in that kitchen for a long moment, because there are some realizations your brain refuses to process the first time. And this was one of them. The refrigerator humming, the afternoon light coming through the window, blinds in long quiet strips. And she told herself there was probably an explanation, that it meant nothing, that Laura had just written down the closest name available. But something in her stomach said otherwise. That detail would later become very, very important. Emily didn't confront Daniel right away. She did what a lot of people would do first. She watched. She paid attention. And what she noticed began to chip away at every rational explanation she had tried to build. Daniel's schedule had quietly shifted over the past several months. Evenings where he said he was working late. Afternoons that were never fully accounted for. Small gaps. The kind most spouses would never notice. But Emily noticed. She finally brought it to him. Calmly, she asked him directly, "Why is your name on my mother's prenatal paperwork?" Daniel didn't flinch. And that's when Emily realized he had already prepared for this question. He said he didn't know what she was talking about. Said maybe Laura had listed him by accident. Said it wasn't a big deal. His voice was steady. His face was steady. He wasn't rattled. And somehow, that was the most unsettling part. Because if you were genuinely confused by that question, you'd look confused. Emily went to her mother next, and Laura shut down completely. Became evasive. Said Emily was overreacting. Said the pregnancy had nothing to do with anyone in this house. 2 women. 2 very calm denials. 0 answers. And when 2 people stay that calm, it usually means they share the same secret. This is where things get strange. A few days later, Emily found Daniel's old phone. an older model he'd replaced months ago. She turned it on and discovered he'd never fully cleared it. Using a recovery function, she pulled up deleted messages, and there it was, a conversation between Daniel and an unsaved number. One message, sent 4 months earlier, read, "We can't keep hiding this." The response, "You promised you'd handle it." New names, new context. But Emily knew the number. It was her mother's. At this point, what would you do? Would you keep looking? Or would part of you not want to know the answer? Emily kept looking. A neighbor, a woman who lived 3 houses down, mentioned casually one afternoon that she'd seen Daniel's car parked outside Laura's previous apartment, late at night. Multiple times, before Laura had even moved in. She said it like it was nothing, like she assumed Emily already knew. Emily didn't already know. And at that point, she was already too deep to stop. And then came the financial records. Emily requested copies of their joint account statements going back 8 months. What she found were charges she didn't recognize. A private women's health clinic, paid for twice, in cash withdrawals that matched the dates. Not charges she was ever told about. Not expenses that were ever explained. The affair wasn't a rumor anymore. It wasn't a suspicion. It was a pattern, and patterns don't lie. Emily was now looking at a paper trail, and it had been right in front of her the entire time. The question was no longer whether it was real. The question was now, how long had this been going on? And what exactly had the two of them been hiding? Emily requested a paternity test. Laura initially refused, but within 2 weeks, legal pressure and a formal separation process meant she had very little choice. Tuesday morning, everything broke. Daniel Reeves was the father. Not a suspicion anymore. Not a misunderstanding. Her husband had a child with her mother. Let that settle for a moment. This man had been sleeping with his wife's mother, under the same roof, for months, and had fathered her child. Emily filed for legal separation that same week. She had the paperwork drawn up quickly, quietly. She moved some of her belongings to a friend's home nearby. She was done. And then, 5 months later, without warning, Daniel Reeves was gone. Just gone. No struggle. No explanation. At first, Emily assumed he had run. That guilt had finally caught up with him and he'd decided to disappear rather than face the consequences. A lot of people assumed the same thing, but the details didn't support that. When investigators entered the home at Emily's request, they found his phone charging on the kitchen counter, his wallet on the hallway table, his car in the driveway, his identification inside the drawer where he always kept it. No bags packed. No note. No withdrawal large enough to fund a new life somewhere else. There was one cash withdrawal, $800 made 3 days before he disappeared. $800 is not enough to vanish. Not if you're planning to. And that's the detail that changed everything for investigators. Because here's the thing about people who run from their problems. They usually take their wallet. So if Daniel didn't plan to leave, then someone else made that decision for him. Investigators began reconstructing his final hours. Cell tower data placed Daniel's phone near the house all evening. No movement after 9:47 p.m., which means whatever happened inside that house. Neighbors reported that the lights in the house were on until at least 10:30, but no one reported seeing him leave. One neighbor walking her dog that night mentioned hearing what she described as raised voices. She couldn't make out words, but it was tense. Investigators pulled phone records, and what they found was that the last call Daniel made that night was to Laura Mitchell. The call lasted 11 minutes. Laura, when questioned, said she hadn't spoken to Daniel in several days. She didn't know the records would say otherwise. Investigators also spoke to a woman who lived near Laura's new apartment. She had moved out of the Reeves home shortly after the separation filing. That neighbor reported hearing what sounded like an argument through the wall on the same night Daniel disappeared. She heard a woman's voice saying, "You said you would handle it." Those were the same words from the deleted text messages. That detail was not a coincidence. Nobody was ever found. No credible sightings. No activity on any of his accounts. No passport use. No transit records. The case remains officially open. But here's what investigators pieced together over the months that followed. Laura Mitchell was not just a woman who had made a desperate mistake. Financial records showed she had become increasingly dependent on Daniel over the previous year. He had been quietly funding her clinic visits, her personal expenses, a storage unit under a different name. There was a level of control in that dynamic, and when Emily filed for separation, that control was about to be exposed. Everything Laura had kept hidden, the relationship, the pregnancy, the financial dependency, was about to come into the light. And Daniel was the only person who could fully confirm all of it. Some investigators believe Daniel panicked when the separation was filed and chose to disappear voluntarily, that the shame of what he had done was simply too much. But others, the ones who studied the evidence more carefully, pointed to Laura, to the argument that night, to the call that lasted 11 minutes, to the statement she gave investigators that contradicted the phone records, to the phrase that kept appearing in different forms, in different moments. "You said you would handle it." Handle what, exactly? The investigation never produced a definitive answer. No arrest was ever made. Some believe Daniel Reeves ran from the weight of what he had done, that somewhere out there he is living under a different name, still trying to outrun his own choices. Others believe he never made it out of that house alive. And the truth may never surface. What this story leaves behind is more than a mystery. It's a reminder of how much damage deception can do inside the walls of a home. Not the dramatic kind you see coming, the quiet kind. The kind that hides behind normal dinners and ordinary routines. The kind that builds slowly, over months, in small moments that most people dismiss. Trust is a strange thing. We extend it automatically to the people closest to us. And that's exactly what makes betrayal at this level so devastating. Emily Reeves lost her marriage, her relationship with her mother, and her sense of safety all at once. Not because of one terrible moment, but because of a long series of choices that the people she trusted made in secret. That's the real lesson here. Deception rarely announces itself. It whispers. It hides in plain sight. It waits. And by the time you see it clearly, the damage is already done. The case of Daniel Reeves remains unsolved. His whereabouts are still unknown. Laura Mitchell has never been formally charged. The child was born and placed in the care of extended family. And somewhere, in Mountain Brook, Alabama, Emily Reeves is still waiting for an answer that may never come. Would you call what happened here guilt? Or something far darker? Leave your thoughts below. And if stories like this one matter to you, the ones that go deeper than the headlines, the ones that ask harder questions, subscribe now and stick around. Because the next story is one you won't want to miss.